What's going on, everybody? StatKing here, True Heel Heat Sports Entertainment. Finally, I'm not always on time, but I'm there when you need me. I feel like that's a lyrics to a song. But I did promise that the Hard Knocks review for the Giants would be coming out. A little bit delayed as some interesting things happened here with life, but you know what it is. We move through, we push through, we get things done. Not always there when you call, but I'm there when you need me. So similar to that, I think is a great way to look at the Hard Knocks Giants season. This was a interesting deviation from the norm of Hard Knocks. Last year they started the new, which they will be continuing this year, Hard Knocks in season, where they will be following a team during weeks of the actual season, which I think is just bonkers in and of itself. I can understand preseason training camp to a certain extent. I can understand what they did here with the Giants with the offseason. The actual in season just seems crazy to me. Like you're just allowing a bit of a competitive disadvantage. Now I'm sure that HBO is not including everything that they film. I'm sure that the teams have some level of creative control over what is being allowed to reach the air, but it's still crazy to me. That being said, last year we saw the creation of the in season Hard Knocks episodes, and this year they are expanding the Hard Knocks franchise, if you want to call it that, the multiverse of Hard Knocks with this Giants off season. We are seeing the Giants go through their off season from the moment the Super Bowl, the season ends, really, not the Super Bowl, from the moment their season ends, week 17, 18, and they know they're done through the playoffs, having to watch other teams, compete in the Super Bowl, and then their draft prep, their free agent signings, their negotiations with current players, all of that, we're getting a view to a kill, so to speak, for what Jeff Schoen and the rest of the Giants staff have to go through. Now, for somebody like me, and I've said this many times on our various football streams, somebody like me who appreciates and really loves the nitty gritty aspect of building a team, this is perfect. This is beautiful. I arguably the off season is one of my more favorite times for football because you can see player evaluations being done and it needs to be done quickly at a very high level, particularly once free agency starts. And you try to understand what are the moves being made, why are they being made, and opportunity cost, right? So opportunity cost, for anyone who isn't aware, is the idea that in order to do something you had to not do something else, right? So let's say, for example, that you are hungry and you decide, okay, I can go to, I don't know, Taco Bell, or a local taco place, right? Like you have, or some other chain, right, of tacos that isn't as ubiquitous as Taco Bell. And so you have these three options, and you say to yourself, this is what I'm interested in. This is my rankings. Now, a lot of these things, a lot of these calculations, right, are going to be done, particularly when it comes to tacos, as great as tacos are going to be done subconsciously. You're not really going to be thinking about it. Maybe you start thinking about, okay, like I haven't gotten paid yet, so I got to go with a cheaper option. Friday's coming, or I got to get a lot for not just myself, but other people, or distance, all those sorts of things. You start thinking about those things, but ultimately you make a decision. Opportunity cost is saying, okay, in this instance, he or she chose to go to their local mom and pop taco place. The opportunity cost was not going to Taco Bell or not going to Chipotle or not going to something like that, right? Okay. So when we take that concept and we view it within the lens of football, it is we can offer this player an X type of contract, right? Like 3 years, 10 million, 5 million guaranteed, right? Okay. Or we can offer this other player 4 years, 12 mil, all those sorts of things. What are the opportunity costs of a Devin Singletary over a Josh Jacobs, a Saquon Barkley over a Daniel Jones? And these are two decisions. These are decisions that are going to be relevant to the conversation we're going to have as it comes to the entirety of this Hard Knock season. And then, of course, you have the draft as well. Like, what's the opportunity cost? Let's say, for example, the Cardinals, right? They had the ability to pick any player that they wanted at the time, uh, besides what's his name, Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels. They could pick anybody, but importantly, they could pick any wide receiver. The opportunity cost of picking Marvin Harrison Jr. over a Malik Neighbors, over a Roma Dunze, right? Like, or I mean, if your rankings were that high, a BTJ, right? Like, whatever the case may be. So that to me translates into the actual games a lot, because what I'll do is I'll keep in mind who they picked over who was available at the time, and one, who they were able to get, who was willing to sign, and how that person ended up working within the overall scheme. And then I go back and say, okay, when they were making that decision, what was the information they needed and what could they have done better to identify let's say it messes up, right? Like, let's say, what's a great example? Oh, I don't know, the Denver Broncos, my team, trading for Russell Wilson. Now they understood that was a terrible fucking decision. At the time, George Patton thought it was a great decision. Ownership thought it was a great decision. Nathaniel Hackett thought it was a great decision. But now you go back and you go, what was the information that they needed to? What was the changes that need to be made in our evaluation process so that we can be better the next year? And then on top of that, the salary cap implications, all that sort of stuff, it has huge ramifications. And so, one, I'm surprised that, to me, if anything was going to make sense for Hard Knocks, from a not losing competitive advantage, it's the offseason stuff, not necessarily training camp. Training camp, you can see if you're good, you can pick out different aspects of scheme that are being put in as you're watching. I'm seeing that now with the Bears Hard Knocks going through their training camp. So seeing this sort of thing really is cool from a ground up level. And that was one thing I appreciated about Netflix's quarterback series, because they really showed the offseason stuff and the preparation and the thought process, even going from day one of what it meant as soon as the season ends and the season starts, particularly for the most important position. And the most important position is going to be something that Joe Shane, Brian Daboll, and all of the staff at the New York Giants, New York Football Giants, have to think about. So let's start at the beginning. Hard Knocks opens with talking with conversations about, the season is ending and what are we going to do about next season? The 2023 season has ended. The Giants did absolutely terrible for a number of different reasons. But one of the big reasons was they did not have Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones gets injured in, God, what was it, He gets injured fairly early on. He week 5, he sustains a neck injury. He misses 2 games. He returns in week 9, but injures his knee in the first quarter, and he's gone for the whole season. So even though he doesn't leave the season until week 9, it's not as though he played all of the games, all 9 of those initial games, right? Because I forget where their bye week was. But there's a lot of issues, right? You have to make a determination of, is Daniel Jones the guy? And that's going to be one of the big recurring themes throughout this Hard Knocks, because the Giants have the 6th overall pick. And more than likely there's going to be a quarterback available. And more than likely, if they don't think that the quarterback they want or they like is going to fall to them, they have the ability with the sixth overall pick to move up. They can make the trade. You're in that striking range, right? To get from 6 to 3 or 6 to 4, right? Depending on how those teams are shaking out, it's going to cost you, but it wouldn't cost you nearly as much as if you were like down at fucking 14 or 15 or 16 to move up to 4 or 3, right? So there's a lot of different things that have to be evaluated. And first and foremost is going to be, do they believe that Daniel Jones is the guy? Now, they've paid him like he's the guy. They gave him that big contract, 100, I think $140 million, huge contract. And yes, they have an out after this year. So they have to be thinking of the future, even if they're going to go with Daniel Jones under center for this year. They have to think about what the situation is. 4 year, $160 million contract, not 120, my bad. But shortchanging this guy $40 million. But realistically, it's a 2-year deal because they can get out of it. But you've already burned one of those years and he got injured. And it's not the first time Daniel Jones has gotten injured. So the question here is, what are they going to do about this quarterback position? But the most important position in football has ramifications for the others because they also have to figure out what's going to happen with Saquon. Saquon Barkley, arguably one of the best, if not the best, running backs in the league, right? You can make the arguments for the Derrick Henrys. You can make the arguments for the Josh Jacobs. You can say Saquon Barkley. You can say, especially after last year, you could make an argument for the people like the Jahmyr Gibbses of the world, the Jonathan Taylors of the world, right? The Breece Halls of the world, the Christian McCaffreys. You can make an argument for all of these guys. So arguably, he is the best, depending on what you're looking for. I think consensus is CMC, but we're not going to digress there. The question is this: how do we pay him? Because Saquon Barkley refused a contract previously. They franchise tagged him. They want to get a long-term deal done. But from Saquon's perspective, you have to pay me because I'm not getting any younger. And this is in football in general, the average player's time in the NFL is only about 3 years or so. But on top of that, he's got a larger issue of, yes, he's making it to a second contract, but he's 27 years old, or will be turning 27 years old. How do I ensure the long-term viability of my family with this career that I'm having or that I will have? On top of that, you have to balance a drive and desire to take care of your family, the people around you, your kids, your kids' kids, all that kind of stuff. It's generational wealth, right? Balancing that with the innate drive and desire to win, to be a competitor, because those are the things that caused you to put in those extra hours, right? Of course, you were like, hey, I could get rich, sure, but another part of it was, I want to win. I need to win. I need to be a champion, right? So for Saquon, he has to balance two different things. And the question for him is, will the Giants put me in the best position to succeed? And if not, can I go somewhere else while also getting paid, right? So they have to figure that out. And so they're trying to have these conversations with Saquon's agents to figure out what is the dollar amount that they can look for. At the same time, they're trying to figure out, with Daniel Jones's huge cap number, 40 million APY, how are they going to pay Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley and 51 other players while still maintaining money for practice squad players, for people when you have to move people back and forth between practice squads. People are going to get injured. They put them on IR. Then you have to sign someone off the street. You need money for that. It's a juggle, balancing the cap. So having these conversations with Saquon, it's really interesting to me because Saquon makes it known. He's like, yeah, like I want to be a New York Giant, but the team has to do right by me because I can understand Barkley's frustrations. For years, even though he has had his own injuries, for years he has been the bread and butter of the New York Giants. They have known that he'll be able to catch it in the backfield, catch balls in the backfield. They know that he'll be able to go out on routes. They know that he'll be able to break tackles. They know that he'll be able to do all these things. But for whatever reason, either the coaching staff, bad wide receivers, bad drafting, bad quarterback play, it hasn't really been Saquon Barkley's fault. Not to mention, I said all of those things, but this terrible O line that has allowed Daniel Jones to get killed, that has allowed Barkley to have to face huge stacked boxes because opposing teams know it's Tyrod Taylor. How good is he going to be able to throw against our DBs, especially when these wide receivers aren't that great? Isaiah Hodgins doesn't really strike fear in the hearts of that many defensive backs. Maybe Darius Slayton does. Waller is looking like he's going to retire, so and when he was on the Giants, he wasn't doing that great. Wan'Dale Robinson's looks great. Jalen Hyatt, they've barely used. So we can afford, out of 11 personnel, we can afford to put as many people in the box as we really can to try to get Saquon Barkley on the ground if they're going to give him the ball. Cool. We'll sell out to stop the run and the short pass because we don't think you can get the ball downfield. Okay. So Saquon's done all these things and he's saying to Jeff Schoen, like, you got to do right by me. And you can see it from Jeff Schoen's perspective of I cannot put all my cards on the table. I cannot give him the farm. I don't have the money to give him the farm. And there's a cool scene. I think it may be episode 2, might be the tail end of episode 1, where they're talking about the different running backs on the free agent market, and they're showing, what they played under their contract number for 2023. I thought it was really cool because you were able to see, hey, this player made this much, this player made this much. How much is Saquon going to want, right? Because Saquon's probably better than everybody who was on that list, except maybe Josh Jacobs. Jacobs has that rushing crown because he topped the league in rushing yards. It was 2 years ago. But Saquon's still Saquon. So how do they figure out how to get Saquon paid? Or one of the things they talked about was a sign and trade. A sign and trade is basically they're going to sign him or franchise tag him, and then they will trade him to another team. That team is going to take on the bulk of the money, and the Giants get some draft picks back. But that has some problems too, because here in this situation now, the team that's taking on all this money because the Giants had to at least create a contract that Saquon was willing to sign. It had to be for big money. So this team is now having to take this on. They're not going to be willing to give back a high draft pick because they're taking on the hit themselves of the money. Things have, opportunity cost, right? We're going to see that come up a lot. So ultimately, I think the Saquon situation is really enlightening because you can see that they wanted him in the building. And I forget his first name, but I know the last name is Mara. But Mara is standing there saying that it's going to hurt my heart to see Saquon Barkley leave the Giants, and he's also saying it's going to hurt my heart to see him go to in division, like an in division rival. Say, oh, I don't know, the Eagles. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But really, they could have avoided that by paying him. And you can make the argument that they misevaluated on Daniel Jones. Now, whether Daniel Jones is a good quarterback or a bad quarterback, honestly, that's not. I'm not talking about that. To me, in football, the greatest ability can and always will be availability. I couldn't care less if you play If you play like Christian McCaffrey, or you play like Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow or Josh Allen or Tyreek Hill or any of these superstars, but I can only get 3 games because you're going to be injured. That doesn't really help me. And Daniel Jones has shown an inability to stay healthy. Now, we can place blame for that on his body. We can place blame for that on the O-line. We can place blame for that on the blocking scheme. There's a number of places we can place that blame. But the end result is that they can't trust Daniel Jones to stay upright. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, what it comes down to is the hit. Daniel Jones can't take the hit. But they paid him all this money. So they're going, how do we solve this problem? How do we solve this problem of the Saquon contract, of Daniel Jones? Okay, let's start identifying O-linemen we can get in free agency. Now, if you're not a competitive team with an expensive O-line, you have to pay players, right? But it gets more expensive if you're not a good team because, like I was saying before, that balance that Saquon has to find between that drive to be a champion and that drive to take care of your family. There are great players who are going to be willing to sacrifice the ability to win a championship if they get more money. It's all a balance. People like Tom Brady, people like Peyton Manning, a lot of these big, larger name quarterbacks who really were geared towards winning took team friendlier deals so that their money came down, but their ability to win a championship went up because that money was freed up to spend elsewhere. But players who are looking to leave a team and get paid, they don't necessarily care about winning a championship. They care about feeding their families for the rest of their natural born days and their kids' natural born days. And that just makes getting and keeping Saquon Barkley more difficult. So we will see Saquon Barkley leave the Giants, and we will see him go to the Philadelphia Eagles for almost the same amount of money that the Giants were willing to offer him. And it's interesting because you got to wonder, why did Saquon do that? And it makes sense from his perspective. He got the best of both worlds. He actually got a little bit more money from the Eagles. He was able to get paid, and he was able to go to a team that is by far a better contender than the Giants. Can't blame him. And sure, John Mara is going to be sick. It's going to hurt his heart, but you really only have yourselves to blame. They really botched and bungled that. Now, could they or should they have kept Saquon when they were clearly in a rebuilding mode, even if they themselves didn't realize it? I mean, you can make the argument they shouldn't have. Maybe they should have last year when they were getting close to week 9 and they realized, hey, I think it's still week 9, the trade deadline, and they realized we're not contending. Yeah, let's see what we can get for Saquon. But of course, week 9 is when Daniel Jones's knee gets injured. And before that, I remember it was just let Daniel Jones get back. When he gets back, okay. So there were some things working against them, but there were some things working for them. And they just kind of misevaluated where they were. They went into 2023 thinking that they were a contending team, and they weren't. They don't have the wide receiver help to get the job done. So the question here is, you can't fully replace a Saquon Barkley. That's not really possible unless you're going to shell out a shitload of money and get somebody in free agency. And that still basically is the same problem that you had just paying Saquon, just pay Saquon. So they're going to have to cobble together a running back room out of Devin Singletary, Eric Gray, and potentially look at the draft. Okay. They're going to spend that money on their O-line and say, all right, cool. Let's make sure that regardless of whether we're able to keep Saquon or not, we're able to keep Daniel upright. Because keeping the quarterback upright is really important. All right, cool. So they get some pieces for the O-line. They add to the trenches. Devin Singletary comes in. All right, now let's talk about this defense. The New York Giants defense is horrendous. And I think that's an objective statement to make. I'm sure that if you look at analytics, there are different things that they were really good at and probably ranked higher in the league. But overall, the Giants defense did not really strike fear into the hearts of an opposing offense. On top of that, the Giants offense was not helping the Giants defense. Complementary football is an incredibly important thing. If you have a defense that gets the opposing offense off the field early, you are forcing that opposing team to punt the ball with a shorter distance. So you're giving your offense a better chance. But if one, your defense is terrible, and two, your offense is also terrible, it's creating a vicious feedback loop. Because when the Giants offense can't score and they get off the field relatively quick, they're giving their opponents shorter field position, better field position. And now the Giants defense has to backpedal and is like, okay, we gotta try something. Maybe we try to dial up more blitzes. So previously, after the offseason, they got rid of their previous defensive coordinator. And now they have to figure out, what are we going to do about this open position. It was Wink Martindale. Now it's going to be, God, I forget this guy's name. It's like Shane, if I remember right. Shane Bowen. Shane Bowen from the Tennessee Titans. And you really see the Titans having a pretty damn good defense. Shane is available because Mike Vrabel got fired, because the team itself wasn't that great. They had a really good defense, but that offense under Will Levis, they had some problems. Derrick Henry starting to lose a step, maybe you could say, but bad O-line. DeAndre Hopkins wasn't looking fully himself, making some good catches here and there, but besides DeAndre Hopkins, he didn't really have much. So Treylon Burks is just, hilarious draft at this point. I think it's still a little too early to call him a bust, but like, you tried to replace AJB with Treylon Burks. It didn't really work out for you. Working out great for AJ Brown. Anyway, so long story short, Shane Bowen's available. They're bringing in Shane Bowen. They're saying, what can we do to try to figure out, with your help, how to make this defense better? Identify the players that we have that you really like. Who are the players you're not that fond of? The ones that you aren't that fond of, can we coach them up? Can we develop them further? Should we try to trade them? Should we release them? But on top of that, who should we bring in? And that's one of the other stories of the draft, or of this season, before we get to the draft, is Brian Burns. Brian Burns is a really, really good player. And Brian Burns is, at the time, a Carolina Panther. The Giants are going out of their way to figure out, how can we get this guy, a offensive linebacker, or sorry, not offense, outside linebacker. How do we get Brian Burns from the Panthers? What's it going to take? And I think it's even in the very first episode, Jeff Jones talking to the Panthers GM about what it would take to move Burns. Now they're going to get this deal done, and they're going to get this deal done for a lot cheaper than I think they should have had to, because Burns to me was worth at least a first, and maybe like a third. You could argue a second, maybe of the next year. Like there are ways to make it happen, but they're going to relatively fucking cheap. So now they've built up their outside linebacker core, and you also see some of the other signings that they do in free agency. And one of the things that they highlight is a couple of these people over the course of free agency. They talk them up, but there's not really that much that they look at on the defense, which I think was pretty interesting. Really, we're focused on the offense. And this leads us to the NFL scouting combine. Now, I really enjoyed a lot of the behind-the-scenes interviews with the scouts and the draft people for the Giants. I thought it was really cool to see their process and see how they were going about the different evaluations. But once we got to the scouting combine and we got to the meetings, this show really, really blossomed. If you can't check out the whole Hard Knocks, I want to say it's episode 2 and 3, but they're really, 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 really good when it comes to showing behind the scenes how these coaches and scouts analyze these players. Because when they are sitting there talking to the top 3 wide receivers, the top three or four quarterbacks, it's really cool. Brian Daboll, for his pros, his cons, his faults, his great parts of his personality, character, all that kind of stuff. Ignoring all of that, the man loves football. You can tell. And he knows football really, really well. And he's asking questions of these guys to break down different plays. He's saying like things like, show me, draw out on the whiteboard what your favorite play was in college and break it down for me. At one point, he's saying to, I think it's Jaden Daniels, he's saying, explain it to me like we're freshmen in the QB room at LSU, and explain to me, teach me this play. And then while they're writing it down, he's already figuring out what the play is. They don't need to explain it to him. He can figure it out. And then he'll say, all right, change this, change that, change this. So change your slot receiver from going on a let's say going out from a crosser route. We're going to change it to an out in. Now, how does that change the overall play? Changing it to an out route. Take the one, instead of him going on a fade, let's change that to a curl. But now we're let me make sure it's on the camera. It's now we're having him conflict with the one. So how does that change the play? What's this new coverage that we're going to be looking for? He starts really throwing a lot of different concepts at these quarterbacks to see what are the different things that you're going to be able to figure out. And I thought it was really cool because they had to do their due diligence, right? Whether or not they were going to get a quarterback, a wide receiver, whoever the fuck they were going to get, they had to do their due diligence on these quarterbacks because Daniel Jones can't stay healthy. They have opportunity cost. Sticking with Daniel Jones and not drafting one of these quarterbacks is a choice. What happens if you make that choice? Drafting one of these quarterbacks and not drafting one of these wide receivers. It's a choice. It's opportunity cost. So then we turn towards the wide receivers and they start asking them a lot of questions. And I thought some of the coolest conversations was when they have Malik Neighbors in there. And they're asking him, what are your thoughts on losing? How do you feel when it comes to losing? And Malik's straight up upright honest with them. He's like, I hate it. He's like, I hate losing more than I like winning. I hate not being involved in the game. I hate not getting, passes. I hate not getting targets. I hate it when I do a lot in practice and then I don't see I don't get involved in the actual game because as we sometimes make the joke on True Hill Heat Sports when we're doing the watch alongs, guys out there running cardio, not getting targets, just being a distraction, or the 2023 usage of Jameson Williams by the Detroit Lions, however you want to look at it. So asking them these questions is really important because when you're drafting somebody, you're taking on the baggage of that person, the good and the bad. And for Malik Neighbors, it's that competitive dog in him. He's got that dog in him. He will not, he wants to win. And you got to appreciate that. And when he says that to Daboll's like, I love that. Like, that's what he's not trying to say like, that's what I'm looking for, but he's like, I appreciate the honesty of it. Like, I appreciate the fact that you're willing to tell me that because one, that tells me a lot about your character. And two, I can work with that because you're being honest. Rome Odunze comes off super polished. Rome Odunze comes off like somebody who he doesn't just understand the wide receiver aspect of the game, but the off the field stuff, what it means to be a lead wide receiver in the NFL and what he can do for people around him in the organization, the community, how he can help other people. And some of you might be thinking, well, who gives a shit? Like, that's not relevant to being a wide receiver or to being a great player, but it is. Yes, you can have those superstar divas, but if you don't have those glue players, it makes life kind of terrible for everybody. Everybody at work has people that are overachievers, but they also have at least a couple people at work that make work fun, makes it a joy to be around, the people you can joke with, the people you can talk to. That's also important. And it helps raise morale. And Rome Odunze really does strike me as a guy that just raises the morale of the locker room just because of how he talks, how he conducts himself. At one point, he even says to them, you're never going to have, bad headlines about me doing something stupid because it's just not who I am. I'm not interested in those things. I'm here to compete. I'm here to be the best player I can be. I'm here to help everybody. Marvin Harrison comes across as, at least to me, almost like a total enigma, which I think is really cool because there was so much talk about him over the course of the 2023 college season and the 2022 college season that people were like, this guy is the best wide receiver in the country. Now, Romeo might disagree with me because he's got his LSU bias. And I'm not saying that Marv's the best wide receiver. I'm saying for the people who watched college football, they're saying he's the best. I don't watch that much college football. Starting to. But Marv is kind of it comes across as though he's saying, hey, there's already tape on me. What more do you need to know? And you know who my father was. You know that's who I modeled myself after. So what more do you need to know? That guy's a Hall of Famer. So the conversations with the wide receivers, really dope. The conversations with the quarterback, awesome. If you are a dynasty football fan, like I am, I think I'm in 7 or 8 dynasties at this point. But if you're a dynasty football fan, Hard Knocks offseason, amazing. Because you learn so much about the players that you can understand Malik Neighbors, he's going to get fucking pissed off if he doesn't get the ball. And do you want that person on your dynasty team? Yeah, you probably do, especially when they have the talent of Malik Neighbors, because that's the guy who's going to be getting the ball. That's the guy who I want to be, who I may want over a Rome Odunze. Or you go, Rome Odunze is going to be the guy that uplifts everybody else around him. That could be actually really good for my team because I know other people are going to be willing to make sacrifices to make sure he gets open. Not saying, hey, in this situation, because the Bears drafted him, hey, Caleb, don't throw me the ball. I'm saying that somebody like a DJ Moore may be more willing to throw that block for Rome Odunze because he likes Rome Odunze. Rome's not an asshole. He's not going to say, let the rookie figure it out on his own. You can see from Marvin Harrison just the pure talent, and you can see the way he conducts himself and carries himself, the knowledge of football. You can see so much about these quarterbacks. You can tell Brian Daboll and the Giants were really impressed with Drake May. You really, really liked Drake May. So much so that they were talking to the Patriots about potentially moving up and taking Drake May. They were very interested in taking Drake May. So I thought that the combine stuff, and of course, you got like the underwear gymnastics and all that stuff. Uh, they show Xavier Worthy breaking the combine record, breaking John Ross's record. You see all that, which is cool. But I really liked the behind the scenes stuff of the interviews with the players. Okay, so now we get to the kind of last minute conversations. They bring people in for interviews before the draft, but we get to the draft itself. And the draft itself is actually moves by pretty quickly when it comes to the overall Hard Knocks timeline, which I thought was interesting. I was kind of hoping for a little bit more drama around the draft itself. Maybe there just wasn't in real life. There wasn't that much drama for them. But with that sixth pick, the Bears were the Giants were really targeting Malik Neighbors. You could tell. And they came up with various what's it called? Various scenarios, and Schoen's breaking down these scenarios for the John Mars of the world of how, like, what do they do if this happens? What do they do if that happens? And I think it's pretty interesting that he calls every pick before theirs correctly. The only thing he technically gets wrong is he says so he says Bears are going to take Caleb. He says Commanders are going to take Daniels. Patriots are going to take Drake May. Cardinals are going to take Marvin Harrison Jr. All those things happen. Now, when it comes to the pick 5, right before the Giants, he thinks that the Chargers are going to take offensive linemen, going to take a tackle, and the question is Joe Alt or J.C. Latham. And he says he thinks that the Chargers are going to take J.C. Latham. As it turns out, the Chargers take Joe Alt. But he knew they were going to take a tackle, so I'm not going to hold his feet to the fire too much for that. But he has all these different scenarios, and it's cool to see him moving around saying, okay, if they take this and then this happens, we can trade back further to do like, and so how they do that whole breakdown, really cool. But at the end of the day, they got the guy they were looking for in Malik Neighbors, and they're able to get Malik, and then we keep going and we keep going, and they show us the what's it called, the second and third, fourth days of the draft. And here, I really appreciate the later stages of the draft, because that's when you build a team. A lot of people focus, and rightly so, on the first round of the draft, maybe the second round of the draft. But the NFL draft has 7 rounds for a reason. You're able to add all these players. And in a team game of 53 people, with 11 on the field at the time, it's more than just a first round pick. It's more than just a second round pick. It's your third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. And the Giants go after what they need. They don't know what's going to happen with Darren Waller. They get a new tight end. They know their defense is bad, so they spend their second and the third round picks on defense. They know they have to figure out what's going to happen with their running back room, because, yeah, they signed Devin Singletary, but they don't really have much behind him besides Eric Gray. Okay, they draft Tyrone Tracy in the 6th, I think, or 5th. So they really did what they needed to do on paper when it comes to the draft. The question now is going to be, like I said in the beginning, why I like that time of the year so much is how those decisions impact the actual game on the field. From a production standpoint, production quality, listen, it's Hard Knocks. I no pun intended, but I can't knock them. From a entertainment standpoint, I think it did. I think it did its job. I think it really gave us a glimpse behind how an NFL team works the offseason. I'm really interested to see which team they go with for next year. From the question of how the Giants offseason went, it's tough because I don't know if Daniel Jones is the guy. And if the guy we saw in the most recent preseason game, from when I'm taping this, the guy who throws 2 interceptions and throws a pick six while he's trying to stop a safety from happening, and he just flings the ball and it ends up being a pick. If that's the guy that they're going to have, whew, it's going to be a long season. And I'm going to feel really bad for Malik Neighbors, especially because he's on 2 of my dynasty teams. But I'm going to feel really bad for Malik Neighbors, who is that guy that really wants the ball and really wants to be involved. I don't know how the Giants season is going to go. I think they're going to be picking in the top half again. I think they're going to be close to where they were picking this year, because I don't think that you can turn an entire franchise's hopes and dreams around with one draft. It's really hard to do. It's really hard to do. In the case of like the Bears, it's not the draft that did it. Yeah, getting Caleb, great, but it's also getting Keenan Allen to be able to distract people from DJ Moore, who's going to be able to distract people from Rome Odunze, who's going to be able to distract people from Cole Kmet. They signed DeAndre Swift. They made a lot of smart moves. I don't think the Giants made as many smart moves this offseason. I think that they got bogged down with the situation with Saquon, and they let it go on for so long. And yeah, they're in a bit of a cap pickle with $40 million going to Daniel. But I don't think they had the offseason that they would have liked. And I think in a year or so, they'll know they didn't have the offseason that they wanted. But I think Jeff Schoen, I don't know. I mean, I'm not too plugged in on Giants fans, whether they want Jeff Schoen gone, but he's got to be on thin ice, man. He's got to be. There's no way. He has tied his future to Daniel Jones. And I don't know if that's necessarily a him thing. I don't know if that's an ownership thing. Like the ownership really wanted Daniel Jones. He was like, hey, my hands are tied. I got to get it done. I got to figure out how to work around this guy. I don't know any of that stuff. And obviously, they're not going to give us any of that kind of thing with Hard Knocks. We'll see how it goes. But overall, I thought it was a really great Hard Knocks. It definitely delivered on everything that I was looking for from an offseason. I think the ways that I would improve it for next year, I mean, outside of the fact that I think it should be 6 episodes or maybe 7 episodes to cover everything that really needs to be covered. But I think I would have gone a little bit further into the coaching aspect of it. I think I would have started to have more in-depth conversations with Dable, with Bowen, with who's the offensive coordinator now, Shea Tierney, because it's Dable is the guy, but Tierney's the quarterback's coach and offensive quality control, passing game coordinator. I think that would have been really interesting to see the conversations, because most of the conversations were always with the general manager. I want to know, especially this past draft, what was it about Neighbors that made him jump off the board to you, right? Like, especially because at that point you knew Marv's gone. So why Neighbors over Odunze? Or why Odunze over Neighbors, right? Depending on how you picked. Opportunity cost. Why not try to move up for Marv? Why not try to move up for one of the quarterbacks? What is it about Neighbors that was just that good? It jumps off at you while you're watching, of course. But for the average person who is not as plugged in, I think going into that a little bit more in depth, that would be really cool. But we'll see how we'll see how next year turns out with whichever team they're going to pick for the Hard Knocks offseason. But the Hard Knocks Bears is going on right now. I'm gonna be finishing up those episodes soon. Well, I mean, they just aired the third episode, and there's 5, so I'll try to get that one out as soon as I can. Like I said, life is lifing, according to as our good friend Drunk Guy JJ or Sober Guy JJ says. But until next time, guys, I want to thank you all for tuning in. Appreciate the support as always, and until next time, remember, guys, take care of yourselves